There are 6 different weapon lines you can utilize in the Elder Scrolls Online, one of which is the Destruction Staff. This is usually the Magicka user's weapon of choice in ESO, but tanks and healers also use this staff as well. The Destruction Staff is also one of the most widely popular weapons to use in ESO, and for good reason. Today I'm going to show you how you can maximize, utilize, and ultimately become an expert with a Destruction Staff in the Elder Scrolls Online. Thank you to my patrons and YouTube members. I will have more on that at the end of the video. You can also watch me stream live at twitch.tv/brahwegotthis Tuesday through Friday. All that will be down in the description. This is the first video of 6 of my expert weapon workshops for ESO. Today we are starting on one of the most commonly used weapons in ESO, the Destruction Staff. This is the weapon that I have the most experience on, and so I thought it would be fitting to start with this staff. We're going to cover what the weapon skills do, the passives, pros and cons of the weapons, what sets or unique items pair well with the weapon, and some useful tips for each weapon that we cover. This workshop won't be perfect, so I encourage you to drop a comment on anything that I missed to help out players. Also, while you are down in the comment section, go ahead and practice that heavy attack on the like button and the subscription button to help me push out this content to the algorithm machine. The Destruction Staff is a two-handed weapon, which means if you have this weapon equipped on your active bar, it counts for 2 item sets in armor set bonus lines. So for instance, if I have a False God's Inferno staff equipped to my character, this staff is going to count for 2 item pieces towards the 5 item set bonus. A lot of people do not realize this. It's okay if you didn't know this, because I didn't know this until a couple years ago. So it counts as 2 items. Any two-handed weapon counts as 2 items in an item set. What roles run the Destruction Staff typically? Well, basically all of the roles except for Stam DPS. Tanks use these on the back bar, healers use them on the back bar, and Magicka DPS use them usually on both bars typically. So what are the skills and what are the passives? Okay, we're gonna go over the skill line now. What we have here is I'm gonna go over each morph and just show you what they do and kind of give you some notes on them as well. So you have Force Shock, which morphs to Crushing Shock and Force Pulse. The only difference with Crushing Shock versus Force Pulse is this interrupts NPCs or other players. It also puts them off balance, and so this is really nice for solo play when you're trying to do arenas like Vadistran Hollows or Maelstrom Arena, or just in certain dungeons, because it's a ranged interrupt. Force Pulse damages nearby enemies if they are under the effects of a status effect. So this is really nice to hit multiple enemies at once with this. So this ability is one of my favorite abilities in the Destruction Staff line. Next skill is Wall of Elements. It morphs to Unstable Wall of Elements and Elemental Blockade. Unstable Wall of Elements is usually the one that the DPS users use, because the effect that is different is the wall explodes when it expires, dealing additional damage. The Elemental Blockade increases the size and duration of the wall, so it allows there to be a little bit more CC for tanks or for healers if they have that on their bar. One of the big things with this skill is that depending on the staff that you use, it changes the ability. So Blockade of Fire for Inferno staffs deal additional damage to burning enemies. Blockade of Frost costs more but grants damage shields and immobilizes chilled enemies, so it will give, people damage shields on your team and yourself. Blockade of Storms sets concussed enemies off balance. Okay, so they do different things. The next skill is Destructive Touch. This morphs to Destructive Clinch and Destructive Reach. Destructive Clinch, the difference between this is this converts the damage over time into a new effect based on your staff type. Okay, so it will do magic damage, but then Flame Clinch knocks the enemy back. Frost Clinch costs less, deals less damage, applies major maim, immobilizes, and taunts the enemy. So this is another taunt for tank. So if you're a DPS and you're using a Frost staff, do not use Destructive Clinch, because this will taunt enemies. Okay, Shock Clinch converts the attack into an area of effect explosion. Now Destructive Reach, what this does is increases the range, reduces the cost as the ability ranks up. Okay, so it does not really change the ability based off the staff, so that is the main difference there. Remember, do not use Destructive Clinch if you are not tank. Okay, tanks are the only ones that should be using this. The next skill is Weakness to Elements, which morphs to Elemental Susceptibility and Elemental Drain. Okay, this is a big skill for healers and or tanks. Elemental Drain will apply major breach and also applies minor magicka steal, which gives you and your allies magicka back when damaging them. So this is a fantastic ability that healers use and tanks sometimes use. Elemental Susceptibility, the only difference is it randomly applies a status effect periodically, while active increases the range and extends the duration, but it does not give minor magicka steal. So usually Elemental Drain is the skill of choice here. And the last skill is Impulse, which morphs to Elemental Ring or Pulsar. Elemental Ring, the difference is it deals damage to a target location instead of around you, so you have to put it on a location rather than around you. Again, based off the staff that you're using, it changes the whatever the ability is. So Pulsar, it also applies minor mangle to non-boss enemies, reducing their max health. It triples the innate chance to apply respective status effect, and it's around you. So Flame Pulsar hits burning enemies, which deals more damage based on their missing health. Frost Pulsar provides minor protection, and Storm Pulsar increases the damage based on the number of enemies hit. So again, the staff matters. Your ultimate is an awesome ultimate in the destruction staff. You have Elemental Storm, it morphs to Elemental Rage or Eye of the Storm. I never use Eye of the Storm because this is around you and it follows you. I just do Elemental Rage, but this is a great like DPS ultimate for like some burst damage. This is going to change based off the staff that you're using. Again, fire staffs increase the damage by 15%. Ice immobilize the enemy's hit for 3 seconds, and thunder increases the duration by 2 seconds. This is just a fantastic ultimate. Now let's go into the passives. So what Tri-Focus does is this is dependent on the staff that you use. Okay, again, depending on which staff, Inferno, Lightning, or Ice staff. So in fully charged Inferno staff, heavy attacks deal 12% additional damage. Lightning staff heavy attacks deal damage nearby enemies for 100% of the damage done. And fully charged ice heavy attacks grant you a damage shield that absorbs 4,426 damage. Also, when you have an ice staff equipped, blocking costs magicka instead of stamina. This is why when you see builds, a lot of times for DPS, they're running Inferno staffs because Inferno staffs usually net more damage output because it's like single target and it just provides more damage. Lightning staves are really good for AoE and CC, and then ice staffs again are like kind of CC and also used for tanks. Penetrating magic. This is your destruction staff abilities ignore 10% of the enemy's spell resistance. Elemental force increases your chance to apply status effects by 100%. Ancient knowledge. This is again based off of your staff type. So equipping an Inferno staff increases your damage on a single target abilities by 10%. This is again why people choose Inferno staff, and Inferno staffs usually have the edge of overall damage over Lightning staffs because this increases your single target abilities by 10%. So that means any single target ability you use is going to have 10% increased damage while you have a staff equipped that's Inferno. Again, this is the difference between Inferno, Lightning, and Ice. So you have to really pay attention to that. This is why people choose these. Lightning staff increases your damage done with area of effect abilities by 10%, and Ice staff reduces the cost of blocking by 36% and increases the amount of damage you block by 20%. So you can see the different niches that this fits in. If you're going for an AoE build and like a CC build, you could definitely use like a Lightning staff, but if you want the highest possible damage, Inferno staff is usually always the choice because it does more damage. Destruction Expert. When you kill an enemy with the Destruction Staff ability, you restore 3,600 magicka. When you absorb damage using Destruction Staff Damage Shield, you restore 1,800 magicka. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. So sustained passive there. So what are some pros of the Destruction Staff? Well, one pro is that it can be ranged, so it gives you versatility in a lot of fights in raids and in dungeons because maybe the boss will put an area of effect down and you can't stand near them. Well, if you're a melee character, you're sort of screwed. This is a big pro for the Destruction Staff. Another pro is the skill line has a built-in interrupt, okay, with crushing shock. It has a built-in taunt with destructive clench, and it has one of the best debuffs that you can put on enemies, Major Breach, and it gives you minor magicka steal built in as well. Not to mention, it has some amazing damaging skills. It has a fantastic ultimate. It has a great damage over time and unstable wall of elements. This is one of the best damage over times in the game for the most part. And Force Pulse and Crushing Shock, like I said, is just a great utility skill. It's got so many powerhouse skills that are used in so many builds. It gives you a lot of versatility as a user of the Destruction Staff, which again is why you see it in tank builds, healer builds, and magicka DPS builds. Some cons, and really the biggest con for me, but maybe not for everyone else, is I think the Destruction Staff is just really hard to weave with your light attacks. So like the Destruction Staff light attack animation is just difficult for me. I have the most trouble with it out of all the other weapons. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a latency issue, but I struggle with it. I struggle to weave. Sometimes it doesn't go off. Sometimes it doesn't do it properly. And so that's probably my error, but I don't know why, but I just struggle with that. And that's one of the biggest cons for me. Another thing that is sort of a con in my opinion, it's not really the Destruction Staff's fault, it's really just the game, but Destruction Staff is most of the time the only viable weapon that magicka DPSs can use. I mean, I know hybridization is now in the game, but there's really no other damaging magicka weapon that you can use as a magicka user, which kind of sucks because that's why you see this in every single build, because that's the only option. So I think that's kind of a con. I'd love to see some variety in that, but that's just my opinion on that one. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about what sets work well with this weapon and things that really give this a boost. Okay, so all the arenas have weapons that pair with the weapon lines. Okay, so you have Black Rose Prison, Dragonstar Arena, Maelstrom Arena, and Vadashun Hollows. So in Black Rose Prison, the staff that you can get, what the ability pairs with is it pairs with Impulse. It reduces the cost of Impulse by 10%, and Impulse places lingering elemental damage on your targets, dealing X Flame, X Shock, and X Frost damage over 8 seconds. Each element ticks once over the duration, and its damage scales off the higher of your weapon and spell damage. This apparently is busted with this skill. So that's what these arena weapons do, right? So for Black Rose, that pairs with Impulse. Dragonstar Arena, the staff pairs with Destructive Touch. So it reduces the cost of Destructive Touch by 10%, and increases your weapon and spell damage by 579 for 4 seconds after activating it. So this is something I use on one of my builds. It's really cool. I like this one. Maelstrom Arena pairs with Unstable Wall of Elements. This is why you see this staff all the time in builds, because your light and heavy attacks deal an additional 1306 damage to enemies in your Wall of Elements. Okay, in Vadashun Hollows, the Vadashun Hollow staff pairs with a weakness to elements. Casting weakness to elements on a target within 5 meters of you causes a surge of elemental energy to tether you for 10 seconds. And then you see down there, it says that it does damage for Shock, Flame, and Frost, which is a pretty insane staff. I've seen a lot of people use this. They said it's very, very good, but it's an insane staff. The other thing to keep in mind is if you go to the Asylum Sanctorium trial, there's also weapons here that pair with the other Destruction Staff ability and other weapon abilities. So Asylum's staff pairs with Force Shock. So this will always apply burning, concussion, and chilled stats effects. So that's the ability that this one gets. Another set that's really nice, I think, with the just like going straight into Destruction Staff weapon lines, and that is Elemental Catalyst. It says whenever you deal Flame, Shock, or Frost damage, you apply a stack of Flame, Shock, or Frost weakness to the enemy for 3 seconds. Each stack of an elemental weakness increases their critical damage taken by 5%. So you can have up to 15% increased critical damage to enemies by just casting Force Pulse one time, because this inflicts Flame, Frost, and Shock damage all at once. So all you gotta do is spam this and you have that. It's a really cool set that works really, really well with Force Pulse. Now let's get into the useful tips for the weapon line for the Destruction Staff. A lot of times you will see that in builds, they have the Unstable Wall of Elements on the back bar here, okay? The reason that they have the Unstable Wall of Elements on the back bar is because this is a damage over time. So when you lay down this damage over time, it ticks damage, right? Every 1 second. If you switch to your front bar and your spell critical, your spell damage, your max magicka, all that stuff is higher, those damage ticks are going to be higher because you have higher stats on your front bar. So that will carry over to your Wall of Elements, which is why people put this on the back bar to lay it down, and then that way when they switch over, it will do more damage. Also, another tip, Ellie Drain is usually used on the back bar for your healers and tanks, because this is something that does not cost any resources, and you just apply it to a boss. And once you apply it to a boss, you let it sit there for 23 seconds. And you usually don't want that to be on your front bar because you have other things there. Just keep that in mind when you're using Ellie Drain. Now, Force Pulse is a great option for a spammable. I love Force Pulse. I use it in like an AoE setting. It damages down enemies. It's really good in certain trials. One of the trials I can think of off the top of my head is Aetherian Archive, is a trial that Force Pulse is very good in for the last boss. The reason it's really good for the last boss is because you have to stay still as a DPS. You can't move around a lot because it has this mechanic where it will chain lightning to people. So she spawns these clones, and in those clones you have to damage them down. So if you turn, you can use Force Pulse and damage them down very easily with this. So this is a great situation where Force Pulse is good. Also, Crushing Shock, the morph of this, like I said, is amazing in dungeons that need interrupts, in solo arenas. It's just whenever you need an interrupt, Crushing Shock is fantastic. But like I said, leave me a like and let me know if you like this weapon series. I'm going to try to go through every single weapon. Leave me a comment down below which weapon you want me to check out next. And I have some other guides up here in the cards that will help you understand what you should be doing next on ESO, and useful tips that you can use in your playthrough in ESO. But if you want to become a patron, you can also check all that out in the description. You get early access to videos and much more. But thank you again for being here. Just remember to have faith, be great, and I'll see you on ESO.